Presiding Officer, I do like to begin my contribution to these debates with one positive point, so let me welcome the fact that peak rail fares are gone for good. The Greens abolished them, the SNP brought them back. We criticised that decision and the SNP derided our criticism, not just on financial grounds, but pretending the policy hadn't worked. Now peak fares are finally gone for good. Well, I'm glad the SNP have finally accepted that the Greens were right on this issue. But the thing is, it's consistent low fares that people really need if they're going to change their behaviour, not this kind of chopping and changing. And as for the rest of climate policy, the Heat in Buildings Bill has been gutted. The target to reduce car traffic has been dropped with no alternative put in its place. Rail decarbonisation delayed and no serious progress on reducing emissions from agriculture. Presiding Officer, we've seen years of inaction on anything other than green electricity production, and that's what left the 2030 target out of reach. Now, the Scottish Government seems determined to abandon any serious policy ambition on the actions that are necessary to make this year's climate plan remotely credible. On child poverty, we all, I think, should recognise that the Scottish Child Payment is one of the most important and successful policies of the devolution era. But it was only possible because the money was raised. Those of us who had made the case for progressive tax for years won that argument and forced the SNP to drop its no-change tax policy. Well, that link remains. We can only invest if we raise the funds. And in a profoundly unequal society, the funds are there to be found. The First Minister, though, is now saying that the Scottish Child Payment is at its limit. And worse, he's actually echoing right-wing rhetoric about not giving people too much in case they lose the incentive to work. That's an age-old story. To give wealthy people an incentive to work, to do anything, they have to be given vast salaries, bonuses and tax havens. But for people in poverty to have an incentive to work, they must be kept poor. If there's time in hand, Presiding Officer.
There's very limited time, but First Minister.
I want to challenge Patrick Harvie's disgusting characterisation of my comments, because I want to make sure that people are supported out of poverty, but I want to enable people to have the ability to access employment. And the characterisation that Mr Harvie has attached to that is not worthy of him today in Parliament.
Patrick Harvie.
Well, the comments that I read from the First Minister's interview did say that he was worried that if the child payment was higher, it would reduce the incentive to work. Just like child poverty, the Scottish Government's wider goal of investing in public services links directly to a new challenge, and one challenge that the First Minister has chosen to accept personally by hosting a summit, the challenge of how to tackle the rise of the far right. Too many centrist politicians around the world think that to defeat the far right, we have to copy them. And that's failed time and time again. We can't afford to repeat that. I would like to hope, and I do hope, that the Scottish Government would not go down that route if immigration was under its control. But on social policy, I fear that they are beginning to follow this playbook by abandoning progressive policies that once had the support of every single party in this Parliament. The SNP are now showing themselves to be as much of a threat to the LGBTQ communities as the Conservatives and Labour. And as Helena Kennedy said about the scrapping of the misogyny bill, she said, we are seeing a retreat from some of those areas that are being characterised as woke. This is not the way. No, we need to change the conditions of our society that give the far right their opportunity to manipulate people and spread their message. There were many participants at the First Minister's Summit who challenged us all to invest in the public services, the housing, the conditions in local communities, which need to change if we're going to address the real and justified alienation which dangerous forces are exploiting. And it was made very clear by repeated comments at that meeting that building a fairer society that recovers from 15 years of austerity can only be done if we continue to raise fairly the resources that are needed, whether that's through local tax reform or through a wealth tax. And on that, Presiding Officer, I'm sorry to say that today's managerial SNP government seems to be terrified of anything that looks like the bold, ambitious change that our country needs.